We looked at kind of broad strokes of wisdom and Proverbs, and we looked at wisdom, and we looked at what it meant to be foolish. And now we kind of get into where wisdom and foolishness are seen in daily life in a specific sort of way, and it's in the use of words. The problem when we get here is, it begins to step on our own toes, doesn't it? Is there anyone here who doesn't use words? Is there anyone here who uses words perfectly? Okay. So we're all the audience to these sayings about words. One of the things I want you to notice as we begin the class is I did put a handout on Facebook. I've been told some people would like the list of scriptures. I also don't like to have all kinds of paper left over class in the pew, and so I'm going to try this strategy. If that still doesn't work for you, let me know, okay? Let's begin with maybe the most obvious one, lying and deception. Turn to Proverbs 12:19. Proverbs 12:19. Truthful lips endure forever, but a lying tongue is but for a moment. What do you make of the time elements in this proverb? Let me put it this way. Does a lie have an expiration point? What?
Yes, it does. All liars are doomed.
Okay. There's the ultimate doom of the liar, right? But the lie also has an expiration point when people discover you're lying, right? Or what about truth? Does it have an expiration point? No. So I think that may be part of the time element. I think both the future of the person telling the truth versus the person lying, I think that's a part of it. But truth is something that, it's not going to wear out. But a lie very well will. Now, that's not to say every lie is discovered, but a lot of lies are. And people get into trouble for them, right? Take a look at Proverbs 12, verse 23. Proverbs 12, verse 23. Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but those who act faithfully are his delight. Now, anyone have something other than abomination for the translation? I'm just curious. It is 23 in my notes. Did I say 24? Or 22? Or... Okay, 23. Does that help you? 22. It's supposed to be 22. I don't think so in the ESV. Maybe it is in some other translations. Okay, let's just go on. Wherever you find it, around that verse. And I say that because I did a copy-paste with my software, so it usually gets the verse numbers right. I'm not the one writing them. But let's go back to the word abomination. What does the word abomination mean? Okay. You're like many a dictionary who defines a word by another word I don't know, right?
Detestable.
Okay, detestable. That kind of gets at it. Detestable. That would be something that causes disgust, repulsion, loathsome, abhorrent. Now, you want to be those things before God? No. No, absolutely not. Those are the kinds of things God wants to get out of his sight. Yeah, I think we can agree about that at the outstart, but we're seeing some things about lying here. It's an abomination before God. This is serious stuff. Abomination is not used all that many times in Scripture, and when it is used, it's used for something very, very serious, something very, very heinous. So we may minimize lying, but for God it's an abomination. And, we need to keep that perspective here. Those who act faithfully are his delight. What does it mean to act faithfully? What? Follow God? Do what's right. Let me throw out another word, because faithful and this word kind of go together. To be trustworthy. To be trustworthy. The liar is not trustworthy. The person who's going to be God's delight is. So we see this high contrast with lying and truth-telling. Take a look at Proverbs 16:28. I hope this one's right for you. Because these were software generated for me. A dishonest man spreads strife, and a whisperer separates close friends. So this one is kind of giving us, well, what are some of the results of lying? And strife is part of it. Strife is part of it. If you've ever been around someone who is a liar, anyone ever been around someone who's a liar? What is it like being around them? You lose respect, but anything else? Okay, it's hard to know when they're telling the truth. You can't trust them.
The thing about lies is they don't always get out of the way. Even if you catch them, there are people who still believe. So when you have a liar in your midst, even if you find them out and kick them out, things that they've said stay.
Okay. I think with this particular proverb, I think what we would say is there's going to be drama, tension, difficulties, interpersonal conflicts. All that's going to come as the results of lying. So lying and deception are something God finds an abomination. Now, one of the things I've noticed in our own culture, and it's been going on for more than 20 years, I guess, is articles about white lies. And articles in the press about white lies usually say, white lies are not bad. And it always infuriates me, okay? I always read those sorts of articles and then I get upset with them. What do we mean by white lie? Okay. Usually it gets defined a little more definitely than that. Well, it's obviously a lie. It's a deception. But usually it's one told to protect the listener. Right? That's usually the element. You're not wanting to hurt someone's feelings. And I would like to suggest to us that we don't have to tell white lies. We just need to look for the positive things in people's lives and maybe comment on those. I had a professor who had an uncanny ability to see the good in everyone. And I remember some of us bringing up some names of people that we didn't particularly care for. Do you have those in your life? And he could always see something good in them. So I think one of the ways we avoid the white lie, that's designed to protect someone else, is to be able to truthfully comment on something that really is good. And my guess is there are good things in most everybody's life. Dave?
Years ago, one lady, she did the same thing you're talking about. She cannot find anything wrong with anybody. Always looking good. So they thought she took her up. They said, "What do you think about the devil?" And she thought a minute. She said, "Well, he does his job well."
Okay. An old joke told one more time. I wasn't going to say that. You keep telling us you're going to live to 100, so you've got a big stretch ahead of you still. Turn to Proverbs 26:28. And we deal with a subject that gets close to this one. A lying tongue hates its victims, and a flattering mouth works ruin. Take a look at Proverbs 28:23. Whoever rebukes a man will afterward find more favor than he who flatters with his tongue. By the way, in Hebrew, and maybe some of your translations aren't using flatter, it's to talk smoothly. Smooth talk. Flattery. Proverbs 29:5. 29:5. A man who flatters his neighbor spreads a net for his feet. So what do we find out about flattery here? Well, I guess we can ask, what is flattery? What'd you say? Well, we can build up someone in a positive way, and giving of encouraging words is a good thing, right?
I think the motive is wrong for flattery.
Okay, in flattery, the motive is wrong. It's not to be beneficial to the person receiving the flattery. Okay, brown-nosing probably is flattery. We've just given another term that we have to define in order to define what flattery is, but thanks. Flattery is usually excessive and insincere praise, given especially to further one's own interests. Now, do you see that in the Proverbs? How is that related in the Proverbs we've looked at?
Honest criticism is ultimately appreciated more than flattery because I think people understand that you're doing it for their benefit as opposed to your benefit.
Okay. And then the negatives, let me just go ahead and say it so that we don't get too bogged down. Flattery works ruin. Now, the flattery may be setting you up in order to take you down, right? And then it says flattery spreads a net for his feet. Is it a good thing to have a net spread for your feet? No, it means the person is trying to trap you in some way. So flattery is given for the interest of the person speaking, and it's usually ultimately harmful to the person who receives it. Now, how do we distinguish between genuine praise, encouragement, compliments, and flattery? Now we're going back to white lies. Okay, I think it's hard to know whether something's flattery or whether something's truthful. And one of the things I've been told about praise is, okay, take the encouragement, but don't live there. In other words, move on. Okay, chew it, but don't swallow it. That's a good way of expressing it. As a preacher, I've received compliments as people go out the door, and truthfully, that's encouraging. At times, preachers can get discouraged. But I think as a preacher, chew it, but don't swallow it. Don't let that cloud your thinking, because you may get prideful. You may think you're really better than you are. So, go ahead.
I will tell Scott, thanks for being God's vessel.
Okay, thanks for being God's vessel. So, we don't always know when we're being flattered and when we're being praised legitimately, but, we can maybe manage that in a way that's healthy. Dawn?
You also need to consider the source, by the fruits you will know them. Where
Okay.
is it coming from and who is that person?
Yeah, you may know that person and say, given their fruits, this is flattery and not a compliment. And that may be a helpful thing. But I'm not certain we always know. Greg wants to say something, and
I'm
he has
having
a
a hard
mic.
time getting the mic to people. We do have a stay-at-home audience that would appreciate hearing the comments from our brothers and sisters. So if you can get your hand up quicker, I'll try and get to you quicker. Thank you, Ann.
Facebook is a place where flattery reigns. You can post the ugliest picture and everybody tells you how beautiful you look.
Okay.
She's gorgeous, isn't she this, isn't she that? We have a neighbor that would scare you. Not just Halloween, but all of her friends have said how beautiful, what a great picture of you.
Okay, let's just let Facebook go. If we start dealing with Facebook, I don't have enough time left, okay? Most every proverb we could probably apply to Facebook in some way. So let's move on. Quarreling. Take a look at Proverbs 20, verse 3. It is an honor for a man to keep aloof from strife, but every fool will be quarreling. Proverbs 26:21. As charcoal to hot embers and wood to fire, so is a quarrelsome man for kindling strife. Proverbs 17:14. The beginning of strife is like letting out water, so quit before the quarrel breaks out. So we have to ask ourselves, what is quarreling? Okay, it is disagreeing, but it's more than that. Okay, argumentative. Anything else? Okay, being nitpicky. Well, that may be a disagreement in general. It doesn't have to be a quarrel, by the way.
Quarrel, I think, is where people have embedded points of view, and there's no attempt to, be right.
He's trying to get the mic on.
There's-
You're going to have a
there's-
quarrel here if we're not
Yeah.
careful.
Well, there's no attempt to discuss, to hear what the other person has to say. A
Okay.
quarrel is all about me. It's all
Okay.
about what I want you to understand, and
Okay.
there's no communication going on.
One of the Proverbs gives us a clue. The imageries are charcoal and wood to a fire. And quarreling often has what we would call emotional heat, right? There's an anger that is out of control. Now, all of us have adrenaline, right? And that adrenaline comes to play as a fight or flight mechanism. The adrenaline is there to help you deal with an issue, the fight, or get away from the issue, the flight. If it's a bear, don't discuss things with a bear, flee, right? Adrenaline will help you do that. So what's the difference between a quarrel and solving a disagreement?
I believe it's having respect when you're having a disagreement. You can hear the other person and not agree with what they have to say.
Okay. Okay, you're listening to the other side. By the way, since I mentioned adrenaline and the fight or flight response, have you been in a disagreement when you noticed your own voice level started to go up and you knew adrenaline was coursing through your veins? What do you do then? You can begin to lower your voice. And I've found lowering my voice in those situations helps to take some of the heat out of the situation, right? So listening to the other person. Anything else? We try to stick to one problem, usually in problem solving. We don't bring up the past. We try to work through a specific problem. Where quarrels are usually heated, they lead to further strife, and yet they can be avoided. And we probably have all heard of situations where one of the things about quarrels is they often happen with people who are close to one another, familiar with one another, and they can be very damaging to relationships. We probably have heard of people, family members who have had a quarrel and won't talk to one another for a decade. Those sorts of things. So we need to recognize quarreling has to do with this angry outburst. We can be angry and calm our emotions and talk through an issue. And Proverbs is warning us about the quarrel. Turn to Proverbs 11:13.
Be angry and sin not.
Be angry and sin not, Ephesians 4. Whoever goes about slandering reveals secrets, but he who is trustworthy in spirit keeps a thing covered. Now, we're getting into gossip here. I'm going to deal with gossip as a separate category. By the way, the New American Standard, instead of having slanderer or slandering, being a talebearer. So tale-bearing is usually harmful information about another person spoken in open public setting, where you're revealing secrets that people wanted to be kept quiet. Do you want everything about yourself told in public? No one wants to comment on that. My guess is most of us don't. We all have some things that we're ashamed of, that we've gotten over, we've been forgiven of, but we really wouldn't want that brought up now in our lives. Take a look at Proverbs 25, 9 through 10. Argue your case with your neighbor himself, and do not reveal another's secret, lest he who hears you bring shame upon you, and your ill repute have no end. So here's an encouragement to settle matters between two people and not spread it about everywhere else. Because you may find, if you do spread it about, that reflects badly on you. You may find people thinking you're not so good because of it. So try to settle matters between two people and don't spread it about. Gossip.
Got a comment by Dennis.
Dennis.
Growing up in church, there was something I had noticed, that there's a big fault among members. If you have someone who has a definite problem, let's just say alcoholism is an example, and they would come back to church every 2 or 3 weeks and come forward and confess they're having a problem with it, but then all of a sudden that person, some people would say, oh, there he is again, must be the same problem. They, not only do they not forgive, but they talk among themselves, oh, there he is. And so we get to the point, not only is it a gospel among each other, but we should keep it among Christians, people's problems, instead of broadcasting it and casting doubt on that person. So sometimes we become guilty ourselves, because this doesn't become a sanctuary anymore. It becomes a place that becomes public, and we look upon them as being not worthy of God, in essence.
Okay. We need to view the church as a hospital rather than a place where the perfect come, a place of healing. And churches can sometimes wound their own rather than help them grow and become stronger. And love is the solution to not wounding our own. It's acting in love, doing what love would do, and we may help someone who has had a besetting sin in their life, but who's really trying. You know, I think coming back when you've had an addiction kind of problem is not unusual, and helping them through it, and maybe this next time it will go better. We don't want to wound our own, and usually when we wound our own, we've isolated them too. And eventually, they're a sheep that is no longer part of the flock. Lisa? He's coming.
That reminds me of my nephew Joe. A lot of you know he's in prison. And the love that he feels from this congregation there. He's been there 4 years, and the cards or not the cards, he can't get cards, but the letters and the notes that people send him, they mean so much. And I mean, that's what you call a congregation backing.
Okay. And we're all praying that when Joe comes back out, he's able to go in and become a productive part of society and live his life as a Christian. Gossip, Proverbs 18:8. Proverbs 18:8. The words of a whisperer are like delicious morsels. They go down into the inner parts of the body. Now, if you're reading the King James, it's going to read, the words of a talebearer are wounds. And I think we need to take the idea of delicious morsels as the correct reading. The King James translators in their preference said, you know, future generations are going to know more about words than we do. And so improvements in translation will come. So this is just one of them. Wounds is probably not the correct reading. That we're dealing with a word that means something that's devoured greedily, meaning delicacies, things that we gobble up. So that's how I'm going to take it, even if what you have in front of you says wounds. I don't think that's the correct reading of the Hebrew. So what is the warning here? What's the warning? If we're not, okay.
When you're talking about gossip, there's three people involved.
Okay.
There's the one who's telling the story, one who's listening to the story, and the third one who the story is about. So it's no longer a two-way conversation. Unfortunately, the third person has no idea what's going on with the second one until the gossip spreads.
And yet it's that person who's receiving the gossip who could stop it, at least in this setting. There's a certain sense of gossip is, you know, I've heard preacher stories describe it as a pillow with down feathers in it that gets opened up and all the feathers go to the, you know, scattered everywhere. You can't collect them all back. But we can kind of shut it down in the situation we're in. And the proverb is letting us know, boy, we can just eat up gossip. We can just consume it. And so there's a warning, warning about that danger to us. Go ahead.
Just with the verse, I think of it, look at it as like it goes down to your innermost parts, like how it really hurts the person that's being gossiped about. And also like the second person he's talking about, if they're not planning on to go share this, like what do they feel, how do they feel about that person that's spreading this gossip, and what do they think of that person?
James Smith makes an interesting comment about the fact that they go down into our inner being. And he writes, the slanderous words do not make a superficial impression, but penetrate into the innermost recesses of the listener where they are thoroughly digested. They are treasured up in memory to be used as occasion may offer. Right? The fact that we take them in and digest them probably means we're going to share them at some point. Dennis?
One of the greatest things I ever learned about gossiping is you go to a party, and usually it's a Christian party, they want to teach you a lesson. So someone will tell a story, and they'll pass around the room. By the time it gets back, it's a wholly different thing altogether. So gossiping never stays the same. It just keeps adding to it.
Yeah, the game is sometimes called telegraph or telephone. and you start a story, and it has to be shared individually as it goes around the room. And a lot of times, then the story is so different, it's almost unrecognizable. Proverbs 20:19. Whoever goes about slandering reveals secrets. Therefore, do not associate with a simple babbler. Proverbs 25:23. The north wind brings forth rain, and a backbiting tongue angry looks. So what is gossip? Well, it occurs in casual conversation. There are things that shouldn't be repeated that either are untrue, and some gossip is not truthful, or it's sharing something that is harmful to someone that doesn't need to be shared. I like this little poem. I don't know who wrote it. And I tell you I don't know who wrote it because the internet attributes it to whole bunches of people, okay? The first time I had it in a lesson years and years ago, I had it attributed to Francis Assisi, who's the one who wrote the hymn Instruments of Peace that we sometimes sing. But then I've seen it attributed to so many people, so I have no idea, okay? If you are tempted to reveal a tale to you someone has told about another, make it pass before you speak 3 gates of gold. These narrow gates, first, is it true? Then is it needful? In your mind, give truthful answer. And the next is last and narrowest. Is it kind? And if to reach your lips at last it passes through these gates 3, then you may tell the tale, nor fear what the result of the speech may be. I think it's a helpful sort of thing. Is it true? Is it needful? Is it kind? One of the tests I've often thought about, and I've not lived this perfectly, by the way, is it something I would want the person that I'm talking about to stand here and listen to? And if you wouldn't want the person you're talking about to stand here and listen, to be a part of the conversation, probably it's something you shouldn't say. And I would say this is probably one of the most difficult areas of the use of speech. Because we engage in conversation. We want to have something to say. And we have to be cautious about the things we say. Well, I had a whole other slide with various points. But it's almost a quarter after, so I know we shouldn't start anything new. But I appreciate your participation and your being here. And I don't know about you, but I enjoy the wisdom of Proverbs. Steve.
Hey, Russ, could you repeat those 3 gates again?
Is it true? Is it needful? Is it kind? And to me, those are probably helpful categories because I feel guilty about them for some things I've said. You know, I don't think any of us live that one perfectly. We will still be talking about words next week. Words are a big part of our daily lives. I don't know whether we'll go back and pick up some of the sinful uses of words, wrong uses of words. We may pick up in the importance of restraint in our words and maybe look at some positive uses of words, and then we'll move on to another category. Thank you very much for being here.